choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
G'day everyone, it's your host here, Annie Hanmer, with this special episode of Space Junk Podcast. And today we are crossing to Rome, where we're speaking with Giuseppe Reibaldi, who has had a long and amazing career, really, in space activities with European Space Agency and so on. And then more recently, heads up the Hague International Space Resources Governance Working Group, which is a mouthful, and the Moon Village Association. Giuseppe, it is such a pleasure to be speaking with you. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, and we are on the other side of the world, in Rome. However, we are connected with the COVID-19. So I think that is something which is putting everybody on the same line. So I think, and that's why we need to cooperate, which is going to lead us what we are trying to do for the moon.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very strange. We've kind of gone through this process of retreating into our homes, and then now we're connecting with each other in this really effective way. And I was speaking to someone recently who pointed out that had this happened 20 years ago, it would have been a completely different situation. But because of space technology, really, we are able to connect with each other in this way, which is very special.
In fact, the root of the Moon Village Association, we'll talk later, is due because of this technology. Say, 10 years ago, this would not have been possible, because being a global organization, as we will see, it will simply not be possible by private people to try to set up this kind of organization.
Yes, that is true. So let's begin by talking about your career, Giuseppe, because as I said, it has been quite interesting and varied and technical, but then also you've got this policy and international relations side of it, which I think is a really interesting mix. So I was wondering if we could start by talking about how you first came to be interested in space.
Well, my interest in space is very easy. I started when I was 9 years old. And the reason why I'm able to say that is 9 years old is because I have a copy of a science fiction novel, which I typed when I was 9 years old, which I have it. And actually the title is Arrival to the Moon, on the Moon. So that is the title of a science fiction novel, which I typed at that time, many years ago. It was basically no computer, but it was a typewriter. So I typed it. It was full of error, full of mistake, but it's very funny to look at and to read it. It's 20 pages. So therefore, that is, I would say, the historical, let's say, proved start of the interest in space. And then since then, basically, it's never left. So when I was at the high school, I was following all the mission, the American mission, the Gemini mission, the Apollo mission. So I was writing to a number of US organizations like JPL to try to get pictures from the probes. They were going to the moon, as well as press release from the Apollo mission to the American embassy in Rome. So this has been, let's say, always an ongoing. And when the Apollo mission, they were there, everyone in the house was stopping. Television was taken away from them, was brought in my room. So I have hundreds of tape recording about all these missions. So I was really a space freak since I was basically in the high school. And then I went to the university, and obviously I made engineering. And when I started, but I have done a classical study. So I've done Latin and Greek. So actually mathematics was, I didn't do too much because of the education. But then, of course, when I started to go to engineering, one of the things which people told me, he said, look, if you want to go to the moon is basically, you have to go via all the mathematics. So if you don't like mathematics, just leave aside. So in fact, I ended up that I liked mathematics, enjoyed. So I went to study nuclear engineering. And the reason why I did that is because of not so much my interest in power plants, but because of propulsion, nuclear propulsion. So it ended up that nobody was interested to have a degree, to have a thesis on nuclear propulsion. So I had to change. I did something else, but the interest was still there. And then actually I started to work for a few months in different organizations, including one which is called Centro Ricerca Aerospaziale in Rome, which was the first organization which launched a small satellite called San Marco. And then I was very lucky because I found basically an announcement of looking for people at the European Space Agency, ESTEC. So I got my degree in July '76. And by the way, I finished with the first opportunity with the highest degree. So I think, again, the combination of the two parameters. And so in July '76, I got graduated, ended up in the European Space Agency in May '77. So, and I was there first as a research fellow in the mechanical area. And then after a few years, I became staff. And then after that, I started and continued my career, which basically lasted 35 years in one go at the European Space Agency. I have made several different positions, covered different positions, starting from mechanical engineering, and then I ended up going through the technology, through science, through Earth observation. So I have really gone around different directorates. And the last 16 years of my career, I was working as head of the division, which was responsible for developing the largest facility inside and outside the Columbus laboratory. So I know what it means to work in the International Space Station, and that has helped me a lot for what we're going to discuss later. During the same time, I took a master's degree in international relations because I was always interested. Politics in space, it's a major driver, at least used to be, it still is. And so I wanted to understand a little bit more, and so I did. And then after the degree, which was in '91, I started the combination of space and policy, and I started to teach space policy. I just discovered that in Washington, there was the George Washington Institute, and that's where it was one of the first organizations. And so I had contact with them. I have been teaching very part-time this space policy, which was basically something which nobody was considering at that time. But then, of course, my engagement with ESA did not allow me to really pursue further than that. And so just to make it big jump, then after 35 years, I finished because, as I said, I left when I arrived to the earliest retirement age with the longest serving period for the retirement. And so I felt it was time for me to leave the organization and do things on my own. The organization has been a great organization, ESA. However, of course, it's always an organization, and so you're, let's say, confined to your initiative. And so when I left it, then the world was open to my own initiative and idea. And so I did several activities, but indeed, as we said at the beginning, the Hague Space Resource Governance Working Group was one of the major. And the logic to do that is that I realized, which basically was the idea, that we needed to go beyond Earth. And having worked 16 years in the International Space Station, I have seen how slow the process is. And is really, we felt that we as individuals, myself and many other people, could give an important contribution. As a matter of fact, I have been member of the International Academy of Astronautics since the 90s. And in fact, when I left ESA, I became director of human spaceflight of the International Academy of Astronautics, which is an organization, which is a global organization, which has given me a huge, let's say, network. And it is this network which allowed me also to initiate the activity, the initiative which I started. As I said, the common element is that we need to basically prepare to use the exploration not only for scientific, because you need to develop something which is sustainable. And so government has a limited amount of funding, which is the reason why we never went back to the moon. And of course, priorities are changing. But if you want to create a sustainable, let's say, exploration, a sustainable activity, you need to raise money. Like it was at the beginning with telecommunication, Earth observation, navigation, and so forth. This, when it started, it was investment by the government, but then industry basically took over. For exploration so far is still science and driven by the government, but because of the technology cost and the launch costs gone down, then obviously you can aim to try to develop market. So, and this is maybe we don't to talk later. So I will leave it there as a first answer, maybe too long.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you. This is great. You ask one question and you've answered so many of my follow-up questions. But I have one that came out of that, which is you were talking about when you went to do your master's in international relations, that you were interested in politics in space. And you said that space has always been political. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by politics in space?
Well, I mean that the route of the space race, which brought us to the moon, it has been driven by politics. So nobody could ever imagine to put the amount of resources which they were made. And I think people like you, which were not born during this year, they have just read this on the book. But if you think about that, in 1957, Sputnik was launched, and 12 years later, people were working on the moon. 12 years in the fullness of time is absolutely nothing. Compare also what we have done in the last basically 50 years since we are at the moon. So I think, and this has been possible only and only because of politics. Politics made space a strategic, clearly sort of military priority, and as such, resources they were not spared. Any other possibility would not have brought us to the moon. So I think politics is the route because space has got so many different parameters going from the military. Let's not forget that space has the route, like many technology, due to the war. It's very bad to say that, but it's reality. You know that launch of the V2, of the German V2, and the team of the V2 is hardcore of the development of space activity. So in a nutshell, I was always fascinated. And by the way, just to make last point, the reason why I was interested in international relations is also that when I was watching all the Apollo program, which I was telling you, the information they were given at the news, and of course, before talking or after talking about space, they were talking about all other politics. So I just came in the mind and said, well, that's something interesting to try to understand what the other people are trying to do. So that is a bit the root of it.
So do you think that space is still political?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Space is still political. If before in the 60, 70, we gave a percentage was probably 99.9 political, I would say now we are down to, I don't know, 80, between 70 and 80, but still a large majority. The rest is potentially commercial, of course, and we aim to have a balance which it will move, but still the hardcore of all the different programs, they are still government. That is life, I think, because the investments are still large and the business plan are not so clear in terms of revenue, but people are trying, and okay, as we will come back later, that's what we're trying to do with the Moon Village Association.
So given that space is so political, then how should we think about cooperation in space? Historically, we've looked a lot at scientific cooperation, but now do you think that commercial could be the path to that cooperation, or a combination? How do you see it happening?
Well, I see happening that talking about the moon, because that's probably what I'm interested in, what I like to talk about. Is the fact that there is a combination of interest or competition. So, in other words, the goal is to go to the moon and utilize, hopefully in a sustainable manner, the lunar resources. So there are a number of actors, stakeholders, particularly government, depending also because of the particular political situation in each country, which are the major stakeholders. So the answer to the question, what kind of cooperation? Well, we have a political cooperation like the one that we had for the ISS, International Space Station, where we have sort of Western ally and the rest, so to speak. And this is something which, of course, it has been useful. You know how the situation evolved between Russia and America, which they were competing, and then they became the heart of the International Space Station. Now, when we move further beyond the International Space Station, there is basically a need to cooperate, because going to the moon is not easy. As President Kennedy said, it's not easy, but we do it because it's hard. And so, like people on the sea, they have a sort of code of conduct to try to help each other. The same ought to be for the moon. The moon is harsh. People want to go, and they have their own political agenda and also economic agenda. But you need to find a common level playing field, so that the people can be fairly participate. And finally, the space and the ISS has been mainly a privilege of a country which had large investment and large economy. I think that's something which is not feasible and is not fair for the moon. So I think all countries, depending on how they want to deal with it and their own interest, they ought to be able to participate. You know, we have brain, and the brain, it doesn't cost much. So, and I think we like to see, particularly for the association, which we'll talk later, that we have brain from all the world. So maybe we'll have hardware from some countries, that's fine, that's okay. But hardware is not everything. Like, you know, you have software and hardware. I like to think that going to the moon, we need, of course, hardware, but the software is also the brain, and the brain of all the people around the world.
Tell me more about the Moon Village Association then.
Well, the Moon Village Association was created because of the need. There was a group of people which I set up, which was called Reflection Group, which was basically originating by the International Academy of Astronautics network, which allowed me to get connected to senior space managers in different countries between the United States, India, China, Japan. So I was able to have a global network in that respect. And so the idea was, what can individuals, because I was an individual, I am an individual, can help basically to move forward. And so the first consideration started to look what NGO were doing in field outside space. And so my reflection, and so we had published a paper which was looking to what has been the impact of NGO in other fields like environment or human rights, and what has been the impact of NGO in space. And so we realized that, of course, the NGO in space, they are very much fragmented in lobby. And so we presented a paper which basically was suggesting to try to bring together a number of stakeholders under the same umbrella, so that the impact on the different local government could really make a difference. This was a little bit the start of the consideration. And then when the question was what kind of organization and what would be the topic, then quickly came to the fact that the moon is the logical step beyond the ISS. And so we decided that we will create an NGO, because of the reason which I just described, which would then be aimed to the moon. And then the question is, how do we call it? We could have called Moon Community or Alpha Community, whatever. In other words, we could have taken any name. But since this took place in the 2016 timeframe, there was already the concept of the Moon Village, which was going around and which was, let's say, restated, because it's an old concept. And many people think it is a new concept, but it's an old concept. Because Moon Village basically means moon community. So it's not a physical village with a church, with the mayor, things like that. So it is just community, you call moon community. So we choose to call it Moon Village because it's something which was generic enough, which could encompass the idea that we had ourselves. And so we call it Moon Village Association. This has given us a bit of a problem at the very beginning, for at least a couple of years, because people were associating this with the European Space Agency and with Jan Dietrich Werner, which obviously it's been supporter of the idea, but our organization is got nothing to do with ESA. It's by definition a neutral organization. We are discussing with all stakeholders, but at the beginning, now a bit less. I would say when people were meeting me, because I've been working 35 years in ESA, they were telling, okay, well, this is, including also the Chinese, well, said this is something which the European Space Agency has created. And of course, so the first 5 minutes was to try to explain to them that, what I just explained to you. So now I think, not sure, but I hope that people understand that we just took the name, because it's generic, and of course we are pleased that Jan Werner it's also part of our advisory council, but like many other people. So in a nutshell, that's the origin, and if you like, I can explain the goal of the association. So the goal of the association is exactly indicated what I explained before. It's a platform. So basically, it's a platform to try not to create a new program, but there are enough activity going on, and as you can see every day new initiative is announced for the moon. So, and all these initiatives they are pretty much on their own. There is, of course, in the political environment, there is, of course, the United States with the Artemis program, which has been announced a year ago. But of course, there is all the rest of the world, which should be part of it. So the main goal of the organization is, not to be belonging to anyone, is to be independent, to try to put in contact, being a platform, as many stakeholders as possible, private as well as industry, and most important, the public. Because the public has been constantly left out of the programs. The space agency have always developed the program for political reasons, got the money from their own government, and then implemented. And then at the later stage, try to sell, if I might use the word sell, the program to the public. Okay. Now, I believe given the consequence of going to the moon to stay is so large for all humanity, as I said at the beginning, it's fair to give a chance to everyone to be involved. And I think this is one of the key features that we're trying to have for the association. So basically, members and stakeholders, which are individuals as well as institutional members, can bring their own enthusiasm and their own idea. And so basically, we have at the moment 40 countries present in our organization. Is not considering that at the COPWAS, which is the organization for the United Nations, where issues related to space are discussed, counts 93 countries. So given the fact that the organization is about 2 years and a half old, although we still have room for improvement, but we are not too bad. So I think that is the main goal. So we discuss with space agency, we discuss with industry, and as I said, mainly with public. And maybe later on we can talk about the initiative which we just launched last week, which is also an important initiative for the public.
I would love to talk about that. Before we do, I wanted to talk a bit more about the Moon Village Association and how it operates. I know you said that you've got 40 countries involved, and that that's I don't know, maybe about half of the member states of COVIDeo. But in many ways, as you say, considering this organization has only existed for a couple of years, that's a remarkable achievement. I mean, you've got observer status at COVIDeo and so on. Why is it, you think, that this organization, and as you say, I understand that it's a platform rather than its own little group, but do you think that's why it's been so successful? Or is there something else, the individuals involved? I'm curious, because I think what you've achieved is quite exceptional.
Well, of course, I always try to achieve more. I think we are still to strive to involve more countries. But I think it's the recipe is very simple. Did not exist this kind of organization. There was no similar organization existing. Okay, there are national organizations like the National Space Society and equivalent all over the country, which, by the way, we have also memorandum of understanding. We are partnered with many of them, but there was none at the global level. So in a way, the principle is to try to bring the enthusiasm of the people together. And of course, we have still a long way. Indeed, people can say, yes, that's good. You have about 40 countries, nearly half of the COVIDeo. Well, actually, we have some countries which are not in COVIDeo, but which are representative in our organization, which we hope eventually they could also lead to enter them in COVIDeo. So there is no secret. It's just that we capture the imagination and offer a platform to a number of individuals. But the main point is that even if the members are from 40 countries, the organization has to develop outside the member. Because one of the main goals by establishing what we call a global network is that you have a core of people which are possibly within the organization. But the most important part is to really raise the awareness like it has been done in Australia, in your countries, in 2019 and 2020. And I believe you participated yourself to one or both these events. So this is the kind of, let's say, event where we like to bring people together to think about issues which normally in their daily life they don't. And they can participate and they can contribute.
I think that's the independence of the organization is quite an important element. As an NGO, I understand that many people participate through in a voluntary capacity, and that's part of its strength as well. But do you also find that, I'm curious as an independent non-governmental organization, as you say, governmental organizations have government funding, commercial organizations have their own private sector funding from private individuals. How does an NGO bridge that gap? Because as much as there is goodwill and volunteers, I imagine that there are also, some organizational elements involved.
Well, I think as we said at the beginning, this is a voluntary organization, but one of the first objectives that our particular American colleague told us, he said, if you want to have this organization going for a long time, you need to move towards a semi-professional type of organization. And they were correct, and they are correct, meaning that there is only so much that individuals which have also other jobs can dedicate to this kind of activity. Even if they love it, they have to earn their own money. And so they can dedicate a certain amount of time. So the truth is that we have started 100% as basically a volunteer organization. In 2019 and hopefully in 2020, we are basically trying to engage basically professional people, basically not too many. In 2019, we had one function, management support, which is basically a sort of mixture between contribution in kind and paid, okay? And in 2020, we are trying to have some of the function also paid, not all of them, of course. And so this year we're going hopefully to go out with the vacancy notice, by the way, which is a partially a paid position for number of activity, including the global network, because we feel that you need to have a person which is really have time to engage and do activity. And the future is that as soon as we will try to raise more funds, which might be your question, how do you raise funds, which we're going to come in a second, we will have to go more and more towards a semi-professional organization. Semi-professional organization means that you have a core of people which are paid, so which ensure the essential function, if I may say, and the more strategic, let's say, function, which are dealing with indeed the strategy of the organization, as well as which direction, that can be left, obviously, to more volunteer, because will not give too much of their time, but gives certainly at a certain point in time some important strategic direction. So I think this is the way we see it. In terms of funding, which maybe your next question. So it's how do you raise the funding? Well, there is, again, there are no secret. We have a certain nominal fee, which is, you might see it from the website, is quite nominal. So it's not a big amount of money, but we organize also events once per year. We have our annual workshop, which has also help us to raise some fund. And we have also institutional member and sponsor, which we hope that they will grow in the future, because they see an added value by some of the activity we do in being a sort of multiplier of what they are doing. And so I think that we have some project where we have some hope that we can get some important contribution, which will allow to go towards more and more this transition.
Now, tell me more about this initiative that you spoke about before, this new initiative from the Moon Village Association.
Well, the initiative which we launched on April the 6th was, by the way, by coincidence, was the same day which Trump, Mr. Trump, had his own executive order, which we can talk later if you like. But the initiative of April the 6th, it's called Are You Ready for the Moon Village? And again, it came from the consideration that there are 3 billion people which are in basically lockdown, isolation. And this is something unique, and we hope that will stay unique for a long time. Possibly for my lifetime. I don't know about yours, but certainly for my, I believe that I hope that this is going to be the only one. So the consideration was space, astronaut, and also potential moon village will have a situation, does have isolation situation. So the idea is to bring, to let the people in the world know that they can get some useful input from experience, which are made regularly by a special breed, which are the astronauts, and which could become also a daily experience once we have a human settlement on the moon, which are isolated. So by this consideration, we devise basically this initiative, which has a short video made by a very young lady. By the way, the gender part is also very present in our organization with some initiative. But so there is a video which explain what is about, explain also what is the Moon Village. Many people in the lockdown situation have absolutely no clue that there are so many activities aiming to the moon. They believe that still is science fiction. So we try to give them a bit of outreach, very short, and if they are interested, they can go and find more. Then we have added what we call the decalogue of the astronaut. So in other words, 10 points, which an astronaut is giving to the people so that they can live this isolation period not as a punishment, but also as a personal development and stay more healthy. And then finally, we have a survey which has a number of questions which allow us to understand a bit of their interest on space, of course, and also to try to understand how they are living their experience. And so the idea is that once we get the data, as many data as possible from as many countries as possible, we will try to get a picture of this point in time of humanity where people were really locked down and how this might really give us changed, hopefully in a positive way. And of course, please do distribute. The more people are participating in this initiative, the better it is.
Absolutely. Giuseppe, if you could identify what the ideal end goal is, your vision for the Moon Village Association and for humanity's interactions with the moon, what would that be?
Well, it is an open cooperation where all the country, or most of the country, with the brain, in other words, by means of idea or by means of actual hardware, they are working together. And we do hope that the moon, let's say, society, let's use this word, a little bit looking forward, might be different. I hope we're learning from the mistake. It's not, obviously, it's not clear that that is going to be the case, but at least you can start with this goal. You ask for a goal. So the goal is to have a peaceful cooperation where, of course, each one has his own priority because this is going to stay there. So we are not totally dreamers, but we are working for the space, but at least personally always have feet on the ground. So we have to understand what is feasible. So that's what it is. So trying to bring the people in a cooperation, in an open spirit together, and trying really to make humanity as a first step, because there will be more steps beyond the moon. And so as a first grounding test ground for the humanity, how can we live and work together on the moon, hopefully in a more efficient way, if possible, on what we do today. And unfortunately, the coronavirus has reminded how fragmented Earth is. Now, that is something which we hope that will teach us what to do or not to do first on Earth and then on the moon. You see, what we need to understand, and that's something which I said, that going to the moon is not an end by itself. Going to the moon is to have a better life on Earth, because this is what many people do not realize in terms of connection. They say, but going to the moon, I'm totally uninterested. I mean, this is something which other people will do. What are you doing with that? What is bringing to us in the daily life? I mean, this is the heart of the matter. In reality, there is a lot of things which we don't notice, like many people don't realize how much technology are present in our daily life. And if you switch satellite, you will have a world which, even with the pandemic, will be totally isolated. So I think there is a lot of space activity which are so much embedded that people don't realize. Coming to the moon, of course, the moon, you have to take a little bit of the medium to long term. I can't tell you, and I cannot justify that a program which is going to the moon this year is going to help you substantially in your daily life next year. It's not correct, and we should not say that. However, in terms of aiming to improve your life condition and basically having an open mind, an open society, this is what it can help. I think limiting ourselves to Earth, also on the psychological, is not good. People are very much keen to have an open-minded, so going outside, so space can give this hope, and we hope that this hope will is transforming in something concrete.
Giuseppe, I think that is a good place to leave it. Thank you so much for taking the
pleasure.
time to speak with myself and with our listeners
Sure.
and viewers. It's been
Sure.
an absolute pleasure.
Okay. Annie, thank you so much for having me in your program. And I wish you, your podcast, and of course, everyone else in Australia or around the world, that they see also the moon with slightly different eyes, which is a mixture of poesy as well as economics and politics. And so everyone can give his own or her own contribution.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I wish you a good day.
You too.